Well, in the last video of putting all the joints into the rear curved panel on these Yellowstone coaches, there was a mistake that I made, and as I was doing the editing, I picked up on it, and some of you picked up on it as well. Well, the issue came up when I was finding the center location of the center 1-inch rib on the framework on the back panel. And when I measured across from the two outside ribs, I had 31 inches. So the center of my rib was 15.5. And you caught that. And so I placed my joint there. And then when I was putting this top frame on, I said, well, I will need to double check that I'm center here as well. So I measured across, and just a quick look, I said, well, I'm 31.25. So I'm at 15 5/8. Well, many of you caught that I was 1/4 of an inch wider on top than I was on the bottom. Well, as I was doing my editing, I noticed that as well, so I came back and measured again. And I'm at 31 1/8 right there. So I thought I can come back and change this and make it right to where I am square between my verticals on my 1-inch frames. And it would be fairly easy to do that right now because none of this joint work is glued in place. I could very easily take this apart, and it's not a big deal to make another 1x2, and I could move this in 1/8 of an inch on each side to accommodate the quarter. If it was 1/4, it would actually only be 1/16 of an inch, because I was just reading it kind of quick on my tape measure and called it 31 1/4. Well, it's 31 1/8. The observation is correct. I am splayed out that 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 on either side, and if it was 1/4, I could be 1/8 inch on either side, splayed out on the top. And I should have checked that, but I didn't. So could I fix it? Easily fixed by changing this framework. But I had mentioned earlier about this outside edge that has to be added on, and how I am at 1 3/4 inches. Well, it actually measures 1 5/8 right there. And if I come down to this side here, it's at 1.5 inches. And when this goes on, you can see that it stair steps down for the side arm of the seat, and then the back gets beveled, which I'll have to do by hand, as it comes up toward the top, because the irons that hold the top have to be at an angle, which is the same angle as the sides of the coach and the sides of the top. So back again in pondering, what do I do? If I didn't have this on YouTube and I was on the clock for a customer, it would be time savings to leave it as it is, and I could play with this additional piece that has to go on and make that taper adjustment, and the outside panel would be exactly right, and everything would be just fine. When this all gets covered up, will the customer, or functionally, does it make any difference on this coach if I have 1/8 of an inch splay out, 1/16 on each side, or even if I was 1/4 of an inch with 1/8 inch, it's going to taper out anyway. I could play with that, and my back panel and all the iron, I could put it exactly where it needed to be, and nobody would know the difference. My saw is already set up for the depth of all this joint work. I have a room full of scrap pieces. I could easily make another one, and it'll be right, and everybody's mind will be okay. And I'm not on anybody's clock, because these are my own projects, and they get done when they get done. So I'll fix it. So when I measured the outside width of my heavy frames, I came up with 41 3/8. And I can say, I think with just about absolute certainty, if this had shown up back in the day when they actually built this, they would not have fixed it. Why do I say that? Because I have taken apart so many old vehicles, and in the bodywork and in the wheelwork, there have been so many variations from front to back, side to side, and even in wheels. You know, you've watched me do enough wheels that I like all my spokes symmetrical around the hub. I have taken wheels apart that there has been as much as 1/4 of an inch difference in lengths of spokes in one wheel. They were about mass production. They were not about perfection. I probably lean too far in the other direction and pay too much attention to perfection and not about mass production. When I measure on my joint work on the outside edges, which would hold the frame on the top, you can see I am at 41.5. So that would be the 1/8 of an inch difference from 41 3/8 to 41.5, which would be that 1/8 of an inch difference, a 1/16 on each side. In the end, really, is it worth it? No. So having the top frame changed out, we'll check our outside width. We're at 41 3/8, and our inside width between the 1-inch frames, right at 31. So sometimes we have to make these corrections because it is just the beginning of a domino effect, and it will affect a number of things down the road. I don't think that's the case here because this is kind of the end of the road. Other times we just do things for the sake of our mental sanity, maybe. If that really gives us peace inside, then it was worth the fix. Well, now that I have myself square and parallel, and I say square because I've gone from opposite corners on these inside frames and kind of cross-checked my measurements. So I'm sitting pretty square where it is. So I'm going to glue these 3 1-inch frames in place at the bottom, not at the top yet. But I want to get the bottoms glued in while I have this framework here to hold everything in position. I don't want to do these outside frames yet. I mean, glue them onto the main frame of the body. So in this corner here, there's a lot of things that have to happen because there's a transition from a curved side to where it becomes straight going up. So you can see we have this transition here. There's kind of a wedge shape here because this is already beveled for the curved panel, and this main frame here that we put on going bent to the top is still square, so I have to bevel that, but I want to bevel that just as far as the top of the frame for this rear seat is. So this is the framework that's going to set about like so. And remember, we have another frame here that I steam bent to make this curve adjustment as well. So I need to put this bevel in and decide just where this framework is going to be jointed into this bent corner that goes up toward the top. So I have the front part of this rear seat frame jointed in, but I need to joint this in as well. So it's going to get jointed somewhere about like so. It'll have a similar configuration as these other seat frames have. So I'm going to try to figure out what the correct location is going to be. Use my square here to hold that in position, and this is going to be where the top of my joint needs to be. So this needs to get jointed in just about this location here. Let's take a larger carpenter square here and just double check that we're on the money, and we're right there. So as I start to put the bevel on this curved piece here, that bevel wants to stop right here, and this will remain square. So this is the bevel of the main frame going up toward the front, and at this point here is where we want to continue that bevel up this curve. And if this is the top of our joint for the rear seat, we want that bevel to stop right there. And where the foot here intersects with the main frame on the body, we're going to be about here. So that bevel is going to go kind of through this position here. And so our joint location on the inside will be there. And my frame blank that I have cut out is extra long, so I have some room to play with. So I'm going to focus on this joint first. And when this comes in and is jointed in, we want this to actually zero out at this point here. So our bevel actually is going to kind of gradually taper down toward the bottom to where we come up. And we should be coming up to this line here by the time we reach this joint and this framework here. So if I can get this one in, because this has to be jointed at this curve, get that one fitted, and then I think I can put this one exactly where it needs to be, as it'll just set in like so. So as I just hold my framework to the outside location here where it's going to end up being, I have here about a 1/2 inch space. So this end needs to be beveled in a 1/2 inch in order for this bevel to be correct with the bevel here. And as I double check with my bevel on my body frame to here, see that correlates there as well. I'm going to be about a 1/2 inch right there. So we can take that 1/2 inch right there, and that should be the inside of our bevel. And this is why I didn't want to have this glued in quite yet. I think it's going to be easier to put that bevel in if I can work with it horizontally instead of vertically. Right about so. And once we're back on the frame, we want to make sure this just kind of flows together. So this joint is an interesting joint for this whole framework. You can see it's curved. It has to set in about like so. And I would like this surface here to be in plane with this framework here. And when I hold this in plane, you can see we have an angle here that would have to be cut in our joint. If I cut this square with this vertical piece, because it's on a curve, it drops this plane out of plane with this cross frame. So on the second seat on this one, I actually beveled this top. And in doing so, this can be in plane with the cross frame, but yet this can have a slight taper to it. So I cut this joint square with this face, and then I beveled this face. But in the case of this framework, both of the uprights were at the same angle, so that would work. But in this case, we have a difference in this angle and a difference in this angle. So if I were just to hold this flat against the bevel, you can see how out of plane this gets. It has to be up here somewhere. So this is the old joint for this framework that we're just looking at. This main frame here is 2 3/4 inches wide. So from this joint across, we have 2 inches remaining. So in 3/4 of an inch, this joint work has to be completed. And this is the view from the other side, the outside curve. But from this face to this face here, we're also at 2 inches. So this joint work is not cut with the bevel, it's cut square with the face of the frame. So if it was 2 inches remaining on the old frame, our joint on this side is going to be about 3/16 of an inch deep, and that's all. But if we come to the inside of the frame and we leave 2 inches, the depth of our joint here is going to be 3/4 of an inch. So the inside shoulder of this joint has to follow this curve. And with that inside shoulder, the outside length of our tenon is going to be right there. Now since this is coming in at an angle, I can't just cut a square shoulder with this joint. It actually has to be square with the face of this curve. This shoulder and this curve has to be at that angle there. And similar on the back, it's going to be that angle there. So when this is actually jointed into that rear frame, we're going to joint in 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to leave 3/4 of an inch here, and we're going to be down to about 3/16 of an inch there. So in general, the angle of this tenon on this joint is going to be about like so at that angle. So to kind of start this process, this is going to be our outer edge. I'm actually going to cut it at these angles, but I'm going to cut it probably 1/8 or more strong. This joint wants to be 1.25 inches. That'll be easier to cut on the bench. So since this shoulder of this joint is cut straight with the main frame here, if I cut this square as well, that's going to help this face be in plane with the cross frame. And then I can adjust this joint here up on the front of this rear seat frame. So even though this is cut at this angle, I should be able to take and cut this relatively square. That seems like a contradiction of terms, cutting things square at an angle. So it's kind of tough to get this angle right because this isn't in position yet. So I think I need to remove this so I can put this more into the correct spot, but yet I don't have that joint cut yet. So I'm going to clamp another board here, so this will be the same height as my joint, and that'll give me a reference point here. So I can remove that framework on the rear seat and still allow me to know where that needs to be. That'll drop out of the way. Yeah, that'll let me put that in position without that framework in the way. Make sure I get this joint right here. I'm coming where these lines are coming up and intersecting pretty decent. I'm off here, but I'm going to take my hacksaw, and that's the advantage of using a hacksaw because I can bend it to this curve and I'll actually fit this joint. And I'm pretty close to flush here, but by the time I adjust the joint inside, that's going to bring it out. Then I'll be able to make that flush there as well. So with this joint fitted and my seat frame installed again, I need to figure out how I can make this just go straight in so I can accommodate this angle on this curved frame and make it shift into place, and how to cut this joint here as well. So from this corner in, I know I'm going to move 3/4 of an inch if I just shift it straight in. So this framework here is almost 1 1/8 inch, 1 1/16. I want to cut a 3/8 joint here and joint this out 3/8 of an inch. So that 3/8 of an inch is going to allow me just under 3/4 of an inch to shift in. But that shift has to be from this line here. It's going to shift in 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to move it to that position there. So that's going to be the same position that I want on my curved joint. I want to be at this location So this moves in 3/4 of an inch, so this whole thing will shift in the same. But I'm going to be down in this location, so I actually have to bring this one out 3/8 of an inch to have it tell me where this joint needs to be in here. So I can shift this in parallel and make all my joints work. So while holding my left hand joint out 3/8 of an inch, this should be the location of that joint on my rear frame. And the depth of my joint on this frame coming up should be right there. And as I mentioned earlier, in order to keep this plane flat, this would have to be cut at a taper, or I can cut this one vertical in line with the straight joint on my rear frame. And in order to do that, I want it cut square with this face. I'm going to have to remove my clamp. I could cut that at that angle, which will match the same angle on my rear frame. And in cutting this joint, I can't be square with this frame because it's coming out at an angle. I need to be straight across this direction. Should be more of that type of an angle. And then I can trim this off here when I get to that point, but I'll leave the upright frame in place and remove this and actually stripe that and cut it to fit. So this should be the style of my joint when I'm finished at these angles. Now I'll cut this a little strong because I can push this frame forward a little bit and allow me to take that hacksaw blade and make it fit correctly. And doing the vertical cut here instead of square with this taper allows me to make a square cut here instead of an angled cut. So this cut becomes easier, and this I'm going to have to do on the bandsaw anyway, so that's an easy cut as well. So this one is going to be a little strong to allow for that hacksaw adjustment. Leave my 3/8. So I accommodated this angle here, but I didn't accommodate this angle here. So that's good reason to be strong. Now this needs to be cut at that angle, and I have plenty enough room here to shift that in as well. That is a much better fit. And I allowed enough room for a hacksaw cut. I can do that on the bottom as well. And make sure we're flush here. And that'll fit up there. Clamp that into place. And that's what our corner joint looks like on our rear seat. So when this is all glued in place, I'll take my file and actually put all these into a consistent curve as well. But that's kind of the joint work in this rear seat panel transitioning into the rear panel of the Stagecoach. Appreciate you coming along. Thanks for watching.